First of all, I would like to thank NACCE and Becky Corbin and her staff and Hillsborough Community College, especially Andy Gold and Beth Curley, some of our earliest adopters, for this amazing conference. We could give them a hand. Many of you may not know that the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program actually launched in 2011 at NACCE's annual conference in Portland, Oregon. And the following year, the inaugural Ice House Facilitator Training launched at the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. And I know that we have a few facilitators in the room who were in the original training. Can you stand up if you were in the original training? Wow. And we have other Ice House facilitators. So can you please stand if you're an Ice House facilitator? That's great. Becky and I had our first year presidency at the same time, and I think our willingness to be vulnerable and our authenticity to figure out how we could partner and leverage this partnership has really built a meaningful relationship. And we now have the Ice House Facilitator Training every year as a pre-conference to NACCE, so it's one of our most meaningful partnerships. All right, I'm going to jump in. So an entrepreneurial mindset is really about creating value by solving problems for other people. It requires humanistic outlook. It requires us to be other-focused. In our 20 years of research at the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative and interviews and ethnographic study of hundreds of entrepreneurs, we have deconstructed the mindset. But at the core of the mindset is really that it is my responsibility to figure out how my interests, skills, and abilities align with the needs of others. And through that, we empower ourselves. It's really our responsibility to figure out how to be useful. We really look at the entrepreneurial process as a search process. And what you can see in there is the need to have inquiry and observation and be creative and critical thinkers and problem solvers and problem finders, perhaps more importantly. We have to work in teams and collaborate. It requires resiliency. Entrepreneurs are really like detectives looking for clues to solve problems, right? Those are the discovery skills needed for entrepreneurship. And the process is really about opportunity discovery. How can we see problems as opportunities? In the first phase, we really talk about problem finding. We often think we know what the problem is that we're trying to solve for other people. It requires inquiry and observation, and it requires us to have empathy, because we have to be good listeners. We have to use appreciative inquiry, right? In the second phase, when we're problem solving, that's where we get into the experimentation and adapting, right? And there's some risk there. I mean, if you think about micro experiments, you may succeed, you may fail. So it makes that risk a little bit more durable. But it does require us to be vulnerable in the problem solving stage. But in order, when we do have a problem solution fit, we also have to have connection. We have to create value for people. Either that might mean they buy our product or they buy into our idea. But somewhere along the line, we have to build some connection that requires advocacy and implementation. That's where we need good communication skills and collaboration. What we do know is there's no connection without vulnerability. So I want to spend a little bit of my time talking about what vulnerability is. Vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, emotional exposure. It's often what prevents us from being entrepreneurial. Biggest barrier is fear because of the risk and the uncertainty. Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. There's one person in my life who does this really, really well. She happens to be my 11-year-old daughter. For those of you who've been in training, you've heard a few Zoe stories. But it's amazing how our children are so entrepreneurial, and you've probably experienced the same with your own. Those vulnerable moments. She's working to master the guitar, and this is a picture of her playing a Johnny Cash song at a coffee shop last spring. It was her first performance. What she didn't expect was to show up to a standing room only coffee shop, literally along the edges in the back. And she said to me right before she went up, she said, "I'm not going to bring my music up. I've got it all memorized." To which my heart kind of fell to my stomach. Maybe just bring it up just in case. This was a really, really vulnerable moment for her. It might be the only time I've really seen her nervous. She's a pretty confident girl. But I want you to listen to 1 minute of her playing, because you can sense her vulnerability, and then watch her at the end when she goes, but also watch the joy that you can see her experience in it. When we're not willing to be vulnerable, we miss those moments of joy. And for our kids, really the self-efficacy that comes out of that moment, taking that risk and really getting to experience the moment of success. This conference has had a lot of music in it, which I love. And since we sang I Won't Back Down yesterday, I won't make you sing Free Fallin' today like I was going to. But last week was sort of an emotional roller coaster for me, and we're in Florida, so we have to mention Tom Petty, but he was really one of my favorites. I saw him in concert 8 times, and the last being in June in Minneapolis. And I was really sad last week. I even shed some tears like watching old videos, and some of my friends were the same. And I thought, what is that? I didn't know Tom Petty. Why do I feel this, emotional about it? And you know what it was? It was really this quote, this like collective effervescence is the moment of humanity where we're all connected. And that's how I felt at Tom Petty concerts. Everybody was kind of one, and we're singing together, sometimes louder than the band, and it didn't really matter who was standing next to you. It was just real, true moments of joy, and you were kind of all in it together. And that's something I'll really miss about his concerts, and I think that's why it's been so impactful to a lot of people. And it also made me think that this was a quote that I heard from BreeNACCE Brown a couple of weeks ago at the Inbound 2017 conference. And BreeNACCE is a researcher storyteller out of University of Houston. And if you haven't read any of her books, you should run, not walk to the store to get them. Some really good stuff there about leading with vulnerability. In this day and age of political discourse, whether it's about guns or racism or the climate change, I love this quote of people are hard to hate close up, and if we move in, if we pick up the phone when there's conflict, if we're really talking to each other and willing to be vulnerable, it's uncomfortable. When conflict occurs, it's easier to resort to the digital sources we have, but when we really move in, I think we're going to move closer to resolution. So I'll close with this. How will you practice empathy and vulnerability? If you look at Inc. magazine's cover this month, it's Microsoft's CEO, and it says, how we change the culture at Microsoft through empathy. These are words that aren't going away, and they're a big part of the entrepreneurial process and entrepreneurial mindset. And really, vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity, innovation, and change. So it's important for all of us to embrace it. Thank you.